Hey cuties, I'm Miles Sexton, a content creator, activist, and loud and proud disruptor of the norm. On our private bits, we talk about the things and people that don't get talked about enough, or at all. Trust me, as a sober, HIV positive, non binary person, I would know. Join me as I chat with people in my life and from around the world whose stories deserve to be heard. Maybe you'll learn something new, and you will definitely LOL. Our Private Bits is also part of the ACAST Curator Network. All right, cuties, we have a very special guest joining us today on Our Private Bits, Kairyn Potts, who is a two-spirit person and an indigenous content creator. Want to say hi, Kairyn?
Hi, abosh that.
Yay! I am so happy that you were joining me. I feel like I have just been so in love with you on social media. You know, you're like one of my like Instagram crushes. And I feel like you also inspired me so much, I think, on my own sort of journey of just like learning and wanting to, I think, like educate myself. And I guess I really like have looked to you for a lot of knowledge. So thank you for being so open, I think, with like your knowledge online and just sharing your story. And I'm so excited that we get to have this conversation
Aw,
today. 'Cause
thank
I just
you.
adore you.
That's so sweet. Thank you so much for having me. I feel the same way about you. I've been following you since we met at the Powwow Cafe
Yes.
that was a
Oh my
long
gosh,
time ago.
so
That was
long
like
ago.
3 years ago, I
Oh
think.
my God, way more than that.
Yeah, maybe
That was like
2019.
before the pandemic.
Yeah. So it's been since then, and I sort of had an idea of who you were, but you kind of were just like this ethereal person that didn't really like exist in real world. And then Scott, my friend Scott, was
Yes.
like, "Oh my God,
We
there's
love
Miles,"
Scott.
and you're like serving this like look. You had this big hat
Oh,
on
did
and a
I?
big flowy like.
Oh, I
We could
love.
see you like 3 blocks down, and he was like, "Well, you have to come and meet this person," and I'm like, "Wow, oh my God, I know who this person is because I followed your work in HIV and in like
Uh,
education for like sex
Yay.
education." So
Oh my
big
gosh,
fan as
I'm so
well.
happy. You know, Scott's also like, I feel like he's like a connector, you know? Like I feel like he like brings
Well,
people
yeah, and
together.
like we can talk about it later, but like
Yes.
two-spirit people, that's a big role of ours is connecting
Ah,
people.
I love that. Well, I love that you brought this up too, because I think for a lot of people, I think the term like two spirit, or you know, you more refer to yourself as winkte. And you know, could you explain, I guess, like a little bit of like what that means so that people can kind of like understand as we go through these conversations?
Absolutely. So two-spirit in itself is relatively a newer
Hmm.
term to describe something that's not new at all.
Hmm.
And the reason that I say it's newer is because we really have only been using this term two-spirit since the early 90s.
Totally.
And this was brought into inception by a lovely elder named Dr. Myra Laramie, who met with a lot of Indigenous elders, queer elders in Winnipeg, and they brought this term. And you know that they always maintain that they didn't create this term; that
Hmm.
this term was sort of given to the community, and they were
Yes.
sort of like a messenger of it. And so that's why we use the term Two Spirit to sort of group together Indigenous queer people for the sake of like legislation and for the
Hmm.
government and for non-Indigenous people who don't understand our languages, and because we have so many Indigenous nations in what's known as Canada.
Yes.
We have hundreds and hundreds of different nations that all speak different languages, and
Hmm.
even in those languages, there's different dialects of those languages.
Yes.
So having like 50 people at a conference trying to identify themselves is really difficult when you're looking to create things for policy and healthcare and all this stuff.
Hmm.
So they wanted to make sure that there was something that we could identify as. And so that's why they came up with the term two spirit. And it comes from the word Nij Manituak. So Nij meaning two and Manitou or Manituak meaning spirits.
Mm.
So it just means somebody who's like a two-souled or two-spirit person. Not everybody identifies with this term. I do it just because it kind of feels right for me. But I identify as well as Winkte or Wiankte in my language, which is I'm Nakota Sioux, and my people speak Ifkabi or Ifka, which is a Stony language, a Assiniboine, and it's kind of like English sucks at
Mhm.
uh, putting into like it loses a lot of magic.
Totally.
And so wiankte or winkte, the root word is wia in our language. Wia meaning woman, and then
Mhm.
wicha meaning man. So wiankte meaning somebody who kind of moves through the world, who is a man who moves through the world similar to how a woman would, and not
Mm.
necessarily looks like a woman or like acts like a woman, but like moves through the world in the sense that a lot of the roles that they play are similar to a lot of women. It may mean that they take same sex partners.
Mhm.
It may mean that the way that they identify or present themselves is really womanly or feminine. And so it just really made sense for me. And I mean, I identify as like queer and like, gay, all these things, but um, it feels nice to have something for ourselves to kind
Totally.
of just like put into words what has existed in Turtle Island or North America for, you know, since before the English language.
Yes,
So, yeah.
absolutely. Is there another word in your language for, like, someone who would maybe identify as a woman, but, like, would lean more into, like, the masculinity?
Yeah, we have lots of words. Specifically, so like Sioux people or and Lakota people, they understood the existence of like male person, woman, and then they had the two spirit person, and then they had the intersex, and they had
Mhm.
like trans masc, trans femme, and so
So
yeah, they had
cool.
really complex and beautiful understandings of what sort of existed naturally in the
Mhm,
community. And instead of trying to like stamp it out or like extinguish it, they sort of
mhm.
just took it as like, well, creator created these people
Yes.
or whoever, whoever you believe in created these people. So that must mean it's natural.
Mhm,
And so instead of saying like, why are you like that? It's like, oh, cool, you're like that. Like, let's learn about that and let's embrace it. And so many of our communities really did a great job of, and I say our meaning just like my people, I can't
mhm.
speak to everybody, but had a great job of categorizing people based on what their role was in the community, like even a lot of the traditional names for indigenous nations aren't gendered.
Mhm.
For example,
So
I grew
cool.
up Cree,
Yes.
and Cree is the most spoken language in Canada for indigenous
Mhm.
people. And learning that, you don't say he or she, you just say like that person or that
Mm.
spirit. Like the
So it's, like,
the
more neutral?
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. I would identify like you, for example, as my like nitotem,
Mhm.
which is just a gender neutral way of saying you're my friend
Oh,
instead
so
of saying like you're
cool.
my girlfriend or my boyfriend. And even like when we call our partners, I would say that my husband or my partner is my nichimus, which
Okay.
just means my spirit or is like close to my heart.
Oh, I
Doesn't
love
mean that
this.
he's my boyfriend or he's my husband or
Yeah.
my wife or anything. Just very gender neutral. And
Mhm.
we say kia to mean you, nia to mean me, and then like anybody else that we're not really referring to, we can say like we are or anything like that.
Mhm.
And that is just like they them almost.
Yeah.
So it's like really we use animate and inanimate to determine like how we change the words. And so even things like rocks, for
Yes.
example, they're animate in our
Mhm.
language because we called them kehteak, or we call them like elders.
Mhm.
So the word asini, which is rock or stone, is actually an animate word, even
Mm.
though in English you would consider it inanimate.
Yeah.
And so it's just really like different perspectives of the way that we look at the world, right? Like we are not different from nature.
Totally.
We are nature
Yeah,
as
we're
well.
all a
And
part of it.
so queerness, since it exists so naturally, has
Mhm.
never been seen as something that needed to be like casted away or like
Mhm.
stamped out.
I think it's really fascinating because I think just double clicking into the language piece first, how, so many people are like, "Oh, well, like, gender neutral pronouns or whatever is, like, so new," and it's like, "Oh, it's like, we don't wanna change anything," when
Yeah.
it's actually, like, not the original, like, this is not actually anything new. It's something that has existed, since the beginning of time,
Well,
basically.
exactly. And more young people are learning about it. And
Mhm.
it's just that I think now we are arming ourselves with the language. We're equipping ourselves with
Mhm.
this language of knowing how to put all of that into words when for so many years, so many generations, you weren't really allowed to.
Yeah,
Society did a really good job of scaring a lot of people into um, keeping those parts of themselves hidden.
totally.
And obviously to their detriment. I mean, we know about how many mental health issues exist in our queer
Mhm.
communities. But now that we're able to kind of start to proudly put not labels necessarily, but just identify ourselves in our own ways,
Yes,
I think that's like super beautiful. And it's kind of like come back full circle to like um, all of the things that I was taught growing up about like how queerness is really natural. And
totally.
yeah, I think it's beautiful.
It really is. And I think too, like I really want like I really encourage people to like even just from like a scientific level, like look at like, the hundreds and hundreds of species of animals that also have more than three genders, like there's such a beautiful diversity that, like, exists in our world, but, I think we're kind of, like, ignorant to learning about it and actually,
Yeah,
like, seeing beyond what I think, like, these sort of colonial binaries that we've
totally.
been sort of, like, put over our heads, for so many years of our lives,
Oh
so
yeah, we're just we live in a colonial just we're like suffocated
yeah,
by colonization, and I wish more and more people understood that like the society that you live in and that you are controlled by without
mhm,
words, that isn't the only way to live and has never
totally.
been the only way to live. And when I tell people about the fact that I might identify as two spirit or whatever,
Mhm,
they're like so shocked and baffled by it sometimes, and they're angry about it because it's like it doesn't fit into their pre-programmed
mhm,
colonial, like, men have to do this, women do this, there's only 2.
yeah,
You have to fit in one or the other, and when you don't, it just gets them so angry, and it's like, have you ever considered that other cultures exist?
yeah,
Other languages exist? Like, you in your little, New York apartment aren't the only person in the world who, um that's not the only way to be.
totally.
Like, there are, like, tribes in, New Zealand and in South America and in
Mhm,
Asia who like have never been in contact with colonization, and
yeah,
I wonder what their societies are like, like what they
totally.
believe. And so it's just that's why I fight so ferociously against
Mhm,
colonization, because I'm just constantly reminded of how much damage like colonization has done and continues to do, because a lot
totally.
of people think that colonization was just like some event that happened,
Yeah. No.
oh, Samuel de Champlain came over, or like John Cabot, or
Yeah.
whoever these like Italian, French, British explorers are, and then that's kind of all that happened. Like, no, it built a structure of
Yes.
colonization that we live in every single day.
Totally.
And that's a great example of like the effects of it. It brought over the idea that, and a lot of it is based in the church,
Yeah.
and people don't like to hear that either, but it's
No,
the
but that
truth.
is exactly the
Yeah,
truth.
and so, um, just sort of trying to educate people and bring some awareness towards the fact that, like, hey, whether you believe in us or not,
Mhm.
we're just gonna continue to exist,
Totally.
and we're never really gonna stop. Like, once we stop being born, then maybe it'll stop, but it's probably not
Yeah.
gonna happen.
No. Agreed, agreed. And I think, like, for myself anyway, it's been one of those things that I've been constantly trying to challenge myself with of, like, like, why am I thinking this way?
Mhm.
And, like, why am I reacting this way? Because I think that, like, you know, these sort of like this colonial mindset, I just it really took a huge like chokehold over my
Yeah,
life, and like how just so many things of just like how I perceived things, even like within, I'm gonna use myself as an example of like my own femininity, like I looked at my femininity as a weakness, I looked at it as like something that is not powerful and is not strong,
mhm,
and it was like that was like one of the like a big thing that I had to challenge within myself of like, why do I think this way? And like why am I reacting this way within myself? And it's like, when I really break it down, it like really comes down to this sort of like colonial mindset that I was kind of groomed into,
right.
like within my family and society. And, and I really try to like encourage people to like, start learning and doing as much as you can to like think about like why, just how we live our lives and like why we're reacting to things and like how we can do better, I think. So,
Yeah, femininity is one of those things, like I see your femininity
mhm,
existing like so much at the same time as your masculinity.
totally.
And I see some of the comments that you get online
Yeah,
specifically where people are really confused by
for
you,
sure.
and you bring up a lot of like you shine a light on a lot of shadows and a lot of people, and that
Totally.
makes them uncomfortable, right? And
Absolutely.
I think that like growing up, I was like always feminine,
Yeah.
super feminine. Like I'm talking like dancing around to Mariah Carey, wearing my like mom's
I
heels
laugh.
and her pashminas, and pretending her hair was mine because she had
Yeah.
long hair down
Oh
to
my god,
like her
gorge.
leg. So I would just like pretend it was mine, and I remember always getting like bullied for it, and like getting beat up by my brothers and like other
Mhm.
boys in the block, and like not going outside and playing with them, and instead staying inside with my mom and listening to like Shania Twain and whatever. Um, but I remember as I was growing up, learning about sort of what Two Spirit was. In a way that was like I had no choice. I was
Yes.
being called Two Spirit by my family.
Totally.
I didn't know what it meant
Really.
at that point. I
Huh.
was only like maybe 4. And so hearing that from other people got me curious about it. And I remember when I fully embraced my two spirit identity, I was about 17
Okay.
and I was just kind of coming out. And I remember thinking also that my femininity was a big weakness of
Mhm.
mine because I had no other way to perceive it.
Yeah.
When every time I was feminine or was myself, I was being, someone was throwing a rock at me and like
Yes.
trying to hurt me for it.
Totally.
And one of the teachings that I got about my identity and about femininity in particular comes from the Cree word iskohteo, which in Cree means fire,
Okay.
but iskwe, it means woman. So
Mm.
the root word is fire.
I
And
love
so
it.
women are this fire, you know what I mean? They're our fire keepers. They keep our home fire. They warm our
Mhm.
communities. And I remember one of my aunties who actually just passed away 6 months ago. So
Oh.
in honor of my auntie, I try to give this teaching a lot. I remember she told me, "You're." So her little sister was my mom who passed when I was 7. And I remember she told me all of that femininity that you have is sacred and it's there for a reason. And your mother's spirit was so feminine because my mom was really girly,
Mhm.
girly, girly, like always wearing turquoise and silver and sundresses and lots of makeup. And she just loved leaning into her femininity that way. And I remember my auntie telling me, like, when she passed away, her spirit didn't just disappear, it went
Mm.
inside of you. That's that second spirit that's so feminine
Ugh.
in you that keeps you like so strong, you know? And it made so much sense to me because like
Mhm.
I was raised by my grandma, my aunties, my sisters, my mom, and my dad left before I was ever born. I don't even know him. And I was just surrounded by like such strong femininity
I love it.
that I realized growing up once I was like 18 and started to embrace it a little bit more that like, duh, like how could that be weak
Yes.
at all when all of the most powerful people in my life are women?
Totally.
And it was really good perspective shift for me and really kind of kickstarted my journey of like holding my head a little bit higher and being
Mhm.
like, you know what? Like all these feminine aspects of me, like I will find family and people around me that will understand that that's beautiful and
Mhm.
treat me as such.
Totally.
And that I didn't have to really accept all of this prejudice and discrimination and violence from people that I was trying so hard to convince who just
Mhm.
weren't able or ready or willing to accept that education and that learning.
Totally.
And yeah, so I just stopped kind of asking for permission from other people and just started kind of just doing me. And if people were falling out of my life, then they would fall out of my life. And that's the way that it's supposed to be, I think.
Absolutely. Well,
Totally.
thank you for sharing that teaching. I think that's beautiful, and I love this idea of like, your mom's spirit being within you and being a part of you, and
Oh,
like I think
yeah.
that's yeah. Oh, I got like goosebumps. Almost cried. I think
Oh,
it's just such a beautiful way to look at it, and I think a lot of people could use that sort of idea, of like we are the next generations of the people that came before us, right?
absolutely. My
And
family keeps telling me. So my mom was always like kind of a firecracker, and
yes.
she was the only person in my family who traveled internationally.
Okay. Wow.
And, I'm always traveling
Yes.
internationally and, like, I'm still the only person in my family who's, like, really going
Yeah.
around and doing stuff, and so they always, like, refer to me as, like my mom's name was Sheila, so they always call
Okay.
me, like, Mini Sheila, where I'm just, like, traveling around wearing the same things she
I love
wears
it.
all the time with my beadwork and everything like that, and lots of makeup and having fun with that, and just, like yeah, I'm just it's such a good way to, like, honor her and, like,
Mhm.
kind of, like, keep her with me, and, yeah, I'm just really, uh I love language, and that's why I think language is so important because
Mhm.
there's so many teachings in it, right?
Totally.
Especially like indigenous languages where that have such a different worldview.
Yes.
Like it makes sense that we would take the root word for women and have it in fire.
Totally.
Like that makes a lot of sense. And many of our words are like that. And so I just try to reclaim the language a lot. And then so I'm like learning so many great
Mhm.
things and I want to like share them as much as I can.
Ah, well, thank you for sharing. Now, going back to what you said a little bit earlier, I guess I'm like a bit curious just because I also, I feel like I watch a lot of your content and I read a lot of the comments,
Hmm.
like in your comment section. Why do you think that a lot of, I guess, not only just like people in general, but a lot of like indigenous people like are very against this idea of like the word two spirit or like the even just acknowledging the existence of it?
I think I think part of it is, well, There's two main reasons.
Hmm.
First one is colonization,
Yes.
obviously. We had in Canada what's called the Indian residential school system,
Yes.
which very quickly was a set of schools, many, many, many schools that were church run and mandated by the government through
Hmm.
the Indian Act, which was enacted in like 1876 or four, and just basically was a mission legislation to
Hmm.
kill. The slogan of it by Sir John A. Macdonald and by the RCMP was to kill the Indian and the child.
Yeah.
And so it was just a campaign of assimilation and genocide against indigenous people and existed for many, many years. And the last one didn't close until 96. So,
Bananas.
yeah. So because of that, we have generations of indigenous people who went on to have children, or if they survived the
Hmm.
schools, because many of them died. But the ones who survived these schools weren't allowed to speak their languages. They were starved, they were beaten, they were abused sexually, emotionally, physically. Um, the ones who did survive are really disconnected, and many of them believe in the church because
Hmm.
they literally had no other choice but
Totally.
to. And so they're very hardcore Catholics or Christians. Um, and colonization just succeeded with a lot of them.
Hmm.
And so it's no surprise to me because in knowing that they would be against, anything same sex or queer
Hmm.
or anything like that. And so that's one reason. Not all of our people are like that, but many of them have been affected heavily
Yeah.
that have a lot of healing to do in
Totally.
themselves. And then the second thing I think is that two spirit is just like it's an English term. Obviously, it's a colonial term to
Yes.
describe something that exists so complexly in so many nations.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people just sort of they don't feel the need to attach that into like onto their identity. And I've spoken with many people in the indigenous queer
Hmm.
community who are very traditional and who know their languages.
Yes.
I just spoke to a friend of a friend in Mohawk territory in Ganawage near Montreal, and he said that like his idea of queerness in his culture and what he was taught and in the language doesn't necessarily fit what two spirit is.
Mm.
um, because I think a lot of people think that two spirit is like you're a man and a woman at the same time,
Yeah.
or you
Totally.
have two spirits inside of you. Which, if you want to take it that literally, then sure. But for me, it's more like I'm balancing two energies
Hmm.
of that masculine and feminine, and kind of using that to make me feel safe and happy and move my life along. And so I don't necessarily take it that literally, and so I have no problem identifying as two spirit because I sort of understand that it's a placeholder term that sort of invites non-indigenous people
Totally.
into a conversation about
Yes.
indigenous queerness. It's a catalyst, really. It's easier than saying I'm winkte,
Yeah.
and here's what that means.
Totally.
We sort of have this this term now, Two Spirit, has been adapted by many people in North America and has been a great way to help teach our young people, a lot of them who are disconnected from their
Mhm.
cultures or their languages, or who are fighting to, come back into their nations and into their culture. I feel like it gives them a good, just like if they were drowning, it's just like a little safe buoy to like hold on to
Totally.
until they figure out what they're gonna do next. And then yeah, it really just kind of starts them on that journey. That being said, Two Spirit people, it's really sacred. It's a
Yes.
spiritual identity. It's something that I try to tell people like if you're going to if you're going to take on this term Two Spirit, I really would hope that you would know what that means
Mhm.
and what that entails. And
Totally.
for me in my community, Two Spirit people often were held not necessarily in like a super sacred regard. They were revered and celebrated, but
Mhm.
more so they were allowed to kind of do and be whatever. And so
Mhm.
many of them were child rearers, mediators, people who I like to call them the in betweeners
Yes.
because they kind of were always the people with a different perspective. And that was sort of the main root of why they were like special, was because they were able to see the world through a feminine and a masculine lens,
Totally.
which not all people were able to do. And so that's the way that I see it. I dedicate my life to being an educator and to being somebody who goes in that in between and tries to bridge gaps and exists in that gray area sometimes. and is a little bit of a troublemaker sometimes when I go into spaces where not everybody is going to accept me. I don't
Hmm.
really ask or care for acceptance. I'm just kind of doing my own thing, and I don't ask people to validate my existence, and I just do it anyway. And that kind of causes a little bit of disturbance sometimes for people, but I have no problem doing that. And I think that that's a role of Two Spirit people, is just maintaining that we will go in between, and we will um, help to change people's minds and educate and
Absolutely.
bring people together, community build, right? So when I, long story short, when I tell people like that I'm Two Spirit, I'm kind of in a way saying that like this is the role that I play in my community,
Hmm.
not necessarily, oh, I'm gay and I'm native,
Totally.
which isn't what it is.
And I think a lot of people confuse the two. Like they think like, oh, if you're two spirit, then like you must be gay. And like I don't that's actually like not
Well, I've
true
had
at
people be
all.
like, "Oh, do you know if so and so is like Two Spirit?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "Are you asking if they're gay or
Yeah.
bi or trans, or what are you
Totally.
asking?" Because yeah, it's not synonymous and they're not mutually exclusive. So
No.
yeah,
Yeah, two spirit isn't like a sexuality or like
no,
a, who you're attracted to.
no, it's
It's
definitely
totally different.
it's a spiritual identity. I think that encompasses many of those things, because not all Two Spirit people are trans and gay.
Yes.
Not all of them are bisexual and lesbian or whatever.
Totally.
So
I think it's just like, it's just like how not all indigenous people are exactly the same. It's like there's so much like diversity within, I think like, the culture and
totally,
then of the kind of term two spirit. And I think people need
absolutely.
to remember that.
I hope so.
Yeah. And also like I think it's really important that I think like, the term two spirit also shouldn't be used like by like non-indigenous people. I think that that's like I don't know. How do you feel about that?
No, I agree.
Yeah,
Stop calling yourselves Two Spirit if you're like non-indigenous. That's
totally.
so not. Why? Why would you? Like,
Yes.
Two Spirit is like it's a community. Like I said, like if it was a community role, if it's a
Yes.
community term, very specific and sacred to a certain community. You're not even a part of that community.
Totally.
How does that make any sense that you can identify that way? I don't call myself like, if I'm sitting on in a stadium watching a baseball game, I'm not
Mhm.
going to call myself the umpire.
Yeah,
I'm not
no.
even in the game.
Totally.
How does that make any sense?
It's true.
So, yeah, if you're, with respect, if you are non-indigenous, stop calling yourselves Two Spirit.
Totally.
It's appropriation and it's harmful, and it minimizes the sacredness. It takes
Mhm.
all the spirit out of Two Spirit,
Totally.
which is exactly what it is. And for indigenous people to constantly, literally be outlawed. We weren't
Yes.
allowed to practice our culture, speak our
No.
languages, gather, do anything like that. With 100 years of colonization and death and genocide,
Mhm.
you have the audacity to now start claiming and stealing and appropriating indigeneity because you think that it's cool or it's trendy
Yeah,
or it's cute or it goes in your Instagram bio or whatever. Like, that is so disrespectful.
totally. And I have to admit, like, I've never actually, like, had this conversation with you before, but I think, like, when I was younger and in my teens and, like, my early 20s, I remember, like, stumbling upon the word two spirit. And it was to be honest, like, it was the first time that I was like, "Oh, like, I think this is who I am," you know? And
Mhm.
so very, like, uneducated, I, like, started calling myself that,
Oh,
which
wow.
is I know, I'm admitting this to you. And,
It's
like
okay. It's a safe space.
yeah, but it was like, and then, like and I was like, "Oh," because I would like, at that time, I was like, obviously, I wasn't doing my research and, like, really learning about what it meant, but, like, in my first initial steps of reading it, I was like, "Okay, like, this is" I feel this, like, kind of pull of, like, the masculine and feminine or whatever inside of me, but and then, and then I had to admit, like, that was such a big, like, learning for me about, like,
Mm,
how fucked up that was and, like, how, yeah, like, literally culturally appropriating
yeah.
I was being and, like, and I'm so it's one of those things that I regret so much, but, like, also it
Mm,
was a good learning for me,
totally.
but, like, I think as someone who is, identifies as white, that I think is just, like, really important, and I think it's important that I also admit, my fault kind of, like, in sort of that because I know that I'm sure there's, like, an interview or something, like, way back when I first started modeling where I referred to myself in that way, and it's
Mm,
just, like, I really wanna call out how wrong that is
mm.
and that people should not do it. So
Yeah, I mean, agreed. And one way that we can stop that is
Yes.
by what exactly what we're doing now, having conversations about it
Totally.
and talking about why it's wrong. And I think that it makes sense that somebody like you or many other people like you and like me,
Mhm.
why Two Spirit really hits home is because we, like I said, we live in such a colonized world
Totally.
that tells us you can't be this, you can't be that, you
Mhm.
have to be this, you have to be that. So when this beautiful idea of gender nonconformity or just celebrating gender fluidity and
Mhm.
all that diversity that exists there, when that comes along, it must feel so like validating and you
Mhm.
feel seen and you feel
Totally.
warm and you feel like you belong. So I don't blame you at all for wanting to call yourself Two Spirit because it is really beautiful and
Totally.
and it's why I like to share it with people is because that that sort of spiritual identifier um is something so unique to indigenous culture, but not only just culture in Turtle Island or North
Mhm.
America, but exists in like I have a Maori friend who taught me about I'm gonna butcher this, but I think it's like Taika Tapupu or something,
Okay.
and it's what they call their two spirit
I
people.
love it.
And then in Hawaii they call them like the Mahu people,
Yes.
and then
Hydra.
the Hydra people in India, and so many different indigenous nations having their beautiful ideas about that. So um, my response. I'm always super gentle when I respond to people who appropriate,
Mhm.
the term two spirit, where like you obviously had no ill intention, and I don't feel that you did. And so what I try to tell them is like I invite them to look into their own history and their own
Totally.
culture and in their own motherlands or wherever they're from, because they probably do
Absolutely.
have something really beautiful that they can call themselves. And if they don't, maybe they can go and talk to their community and maybe come up with something.
Mhm.
Language is just that, it's language, and it's literally made up.
Yes, yeah.
So we have the
We
power
created
to
it.
make it up.
Yeah.
And it changes. Language is like always evolving. And so
Mhm.
let's evolve all of our cultures and start coming up with some beautiful ways to describe ourselves that doesn't necessarily step on the toes of other marginalized communities and
Absolutely.
make them feel invalidated or like stolen from.
Ah, well, thank you for having this conversation with me. I think it was an important one, and I was, nervous and excited to have this conversation with you today. Um, but another question that I have for you is, I guess, like, how like, going forward from this conversation, how are you now, I guess, like, celebrating, like, your culture and your queerness? Like, how does that, like, exist for you?
One of the biggest things I do is literally just exist the way that I exist
Yes.
because it's so hard.
Totally.
It's and when I say that it's hard, what I don't mean like, I don't mean like, "Oh, it's hard to, like, exist the way that I do." That's the easy part, but, existing the way that I do when it's not safe,
Mhm.
existing the way that I do when I know I'm gonna get people
Totally.
upset, going into spaces, especially indigenous spaces where I know that there's a lot of, violence
Mhm.
or a lot of, like, intolerance or a lot of, like, I just know I'm gonna be at like, it's gonna be adversarial.
For sure.
That's when your identity and your self-confidence and your foundation really starts to get tested. It's like,
Mhm.
am I still gonna be me when there's, like, a threat?
Totally.
Which I always tell people, like, "Stay safe, it's not worth it." Um, but one thing that I try to do in my to celebrate my queer indigenous identity is I attend a lot of two-spirit gatherings.
Love
There are
it.
a lot that exist in Canada. I'm going to one every other month, and I go out on the land with old indigenous people, elders, knowledge keepers,
Ah,
people who are cultural protectors, who are
mhm.
two-spirit, who are just consistently teaching me so many beautiful things. And I try my hardest to learn, 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 learn like a sponge
Mhm.
because I know our old people aren't gonna live forever,
Totally.
and especially, like, being Indigenous already, you have a lower life expectancy. Being a queer person, you have a lower life
Yeah.
expectancy. So many of our Two-Spirit people are struggling with dying early, and I don't even know any Two-Spirit person that's older than 68.
Yeah. Wow.
So, like, it doesn't give me a lot of hope, but I'm also like, I feel this urgency to learn so
Totally.
that when young people come to me crying and they don't know how to, they have nobody to connect to, I can at least give them whatever I can.
Mhm.
That's one way that I'm practicing my culture is making sure that I'm a protector, a keeper of knowledge.
Yes.
I try to tell people, like, it doesn't matter if you're not an elder and you're not like 7 years old and been in, the ceremonial space for your entire life. Like, even a newborn baby is a knowledge keeper.
Mhm. Totally.
Like, we can learn so much from everybody around us, and as indigenous people, we should be forever learners
Mhm.
and people who are constantly open to adapting and to seeing the world through different perspectives. And so, because Two-Spirit people have that great ability to do that, that's exactly what I try to do to celebrate and keep and protect our culture. I'm in the process of learning my language.
I love it.
I speak Cree pretty decently, but I'm
Yes.
not Cree. I just grew up Cree. Many of my family is Cree, but like I said, my family is Stony, we're Ithkabi,
Mhm.
and that's a hard language to learn.
I bet.
Like, I speak Mandarin and I speak Spanish through junior high and high school, and English, but and Cree, but Stony is really difficult to learn, even for me. And
Is it
uh,
because you can't, like, find people to teach
yeah,
you, or
there's
it's
just
like
hardly any resources.
yeah, wow.
I remember one time I tried to take a course through Zoom, and the internet on the reserve was just so bad, and the elder didn't really like couldn't troubleshoot Zoom.
Oh, no.
So it was like just a
Yeah.
whole lot of barriers and factors
Mhm.
already in place. And because the language itself is just very difficult,
Yes.
that just made it even worse. It
Totally.
was just like all of the odds are stacked against you. And then, like my auntie is one of the last, I think there's like maybe 6 fluent speakers left in my family. My
Whoa.
auntie was one of those big pieces of
Yeah.
like I was just mining her for
Yeah.
information constantly, and she loved sharing it with me. And then when she passed, I remember thinking like, why didn't, 3 years ago I sit down with her and do a podcast and have her
Yeah.
speak the language to me and teach me? And then I felt just this like big shame and
Ugh.
just like this, like I didn't just lose her as like someone I love, but I lost
Yeah.
like, 68
Totally.
years of
Know your history.
history,
Yeah.
and like we'll never have that now. And my kids will never be able to meet their
Mhm.
magushin, their grandma, and like it was just like such a spiral of grief. And so now I'm like, there's a fire under my ass a little bit where I'm
Yeah.
like, if I don't learn this, I'm probably one of the last people in my family who will have that opportunity
Totally.
and the resources to do it. Um, and it might just die with my generation, and that's really scary.
Would you
And
ever
the government's not doing anything about it,
no, which is
and it's
awful.
their fault.
Totally. We should be preserving this. This is, like, the true part of Canadian history,
Yeah, I have a
right?
lot of rage when it
Yeah.
comes to language because
Totally.
I love our languages.
Mhm.
And I feel so disrespected when I go back home to Amiskwichiweskaikan, which
Yeah.
is Edmonton in
Okay.
Alberta. I go back there and the entire city is like masquerading that they love Cree,
Yeah.
like every single street, every park, every national forest, all of it is all named in Cree.
Mhm.
Every neighborhood is Cree. And no one knows how to pronounce the names. The city planners are like, it would be cute if we named,
Yeah.
this park Casqueteo or something. Like, let's just do it to like honor the language. And yet, where are the like schools teaching the
Mhm.
language?
Exactly.
Where's the money going to bring elders in and document and create books and videos and podcasts and
Mhm.
textbooks? And why aren't we doing that?
Totally.
We're not. And so it's empty. It's like a land acknowledgement.
Yes.
It's empty. Where's the action?
Totally.
Let's fix it, Stop talking about it. It's not gonna do anything. Our elders are dying, they're getting sick, like they live in poverty, they're dealing with intergenerational trauma.
Mhm.
They've all had the language beaten out of them. So if the
Yes.
language is still there, let's protect it like a little pilot light and like feed
Totally.
it so it builds to a big bonfire again?
Do you think that you would ever take that on and documenting it?
I would love to. I would love to apply for a grant and go back home to my nation and gather up, 50 people and have like a 1 week conference where we just sit around and speak the language
I
and
love
create
it.
like a database where it's not enough to just have these books.
No.
We need video of old people speaking it
Totally.
because it's
Exactly. That's
so
how it's
you
taught,
lose it.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will look at a word and then I'll have the person say the word and it's totally
It's
different. And I'm like, oh my
absolutely
God, I would have said that so wrong. So that's necessary. It's absolutely necessary. And it's happening in many nations. Like
yes.
I have friends who are younger than me who are
Mhm.
fluent in their languages in their reserves
Wow.
because you have no choice but to learn the language because
Totally.
they force you to do it since kindergarten.
Yes.
Why haven't we been doing that in like every reserve?
Totally.
Why is that not a national emergency?
Wow.
Well, I know why it's not a national emergency. It's quite obvious if you look at Canada's history, but it's the same reason why the North, like in the Arctic,
Mhm.
why the Inuit communities are like have been under a state of emergency for 10 years
Yeah.
because of the youth committing suicide. And yet,
Yeah. What's
okay, so
being
it's
done?
emergency. No one's really doing anything about it.
Totally.
The money that they are sending up there is going to like it's going to non-indigenous people to fly up there to try to apply Western ideals about mental health to our young people. And then it's
Yeah.
not working.
No, it's
And
not
then they're like,
working.
well, we
Exactly.
tried everything. It's like,
Yeah.
no, you
No,
didn't give back the autonomy and the power to indigenous people. You took away all the resources and now you're like giving them white resources and
yeah.
like,
Which
it's
aren't,
just so backwards.
well, I hope.
That's why we have that rage, you know?
Yes,
That's why I'm on
exactly.
social media
That's
every
why
time
the
you see my
fire is
big dumb
there.
face, always like, "Ah."
No, because I think even though we are individual like people, I think we have the power to create change. And I know that you are already doing it. And I
Mm,
hope that, you know, when you're old, that you're very proud of all of the work that you've done. Because I think that you are. I think you're going to change Canada or whatever you want to call it, for the
mhm.
better, I hope.
I
So
hope so too. I hope that it's not just me, and I hope that even young people seeing me do what I do in
totally.
spaces where I'm at because
So you're creating community, even if it's
exactly.
just online, right?
I just want them to know that like they're not alone. We're all trying to like make the world a better place for our communities and it starts with just little steps and there are spaces out there that have
Totally.
already like had the wave
Yes.
paved for them
Yes.
and then they can step in and take up this gauntlet and being yourself sometimes is enough too.
Absolutely. Now, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, but I think you you talked about land acknowledgements and them being empty. Because, like, I honestly, like, I f it feels so performative to me. Like, I get a asked to speak a lot, and then they ask me to do a land acknowledgement, and I just, like, I feel like it's so performative. I feel uncomfortable, to
Yeah.
be honest, like, saying them. How do you feel about it?
Um I always make fun of it.
Yeah.
Like, I get asked to do land acknowledgements so often. Even just recently, like I did a campaign with Prime Video
Yeah.
and they like put me up in this big billboard in Young and Dundas and like brought me out to this event where I had to like host an opening slash premiere of The Lake.
Yes.
And they asked me to do a land acknowledgement. And I was like, are you serious?
Oh, no.
And they were like, yeah, it's like it's really important to us. And I was like, okay, kind of messed up. You're asking an indigenous person to do it.
Yeah.
But you know what? Whatever, I'll do it. And then I said, is it cool if I just do it my own way?
Yes.
And they were like, yeah, you have total autonomy. We just have to see the script beforehand. So I wrote it and I just ripped it apart. I just like made it like almost like a comedy set
Yeah.
because I don't see what people are gonna get out of me sitting up there saying like, we are gathered here today on like Treaty 13, Dish with One Spoon territory,
Yes.
homelands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and just name off random
Totally.
nations. Nobody knows who these nations are. They've
No.
never heard them. They're gonna forget everything I said 2 seconds later. So what's the deal, right? So instead, I made a list of challenges, calls to action.
I love it.
And I said, okay, everyone, we're doing a land acknowledgement. But instead of that, I'm actually just going to ask you all to learn 5 words in Anishinaabe, Moin,
I love
because
it.
that's the language of the people here.
Yes.
Go out and become friends with an indigenous person. Go out to the Anin Hello store and buy one piece of,
Totally.
indigenous fashion from some of these local vendors who rely on it. Go out to your local reserve, learn about, what kind of issues they have, maybe do some donations, raise some awareness.
Mhm.
All of you should go out and learn about Orange Shirt Day. What have you guys done for MMIW2SG? Like, maybe attend a pat. Like, I'm giving them so many,
Yes.
like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And then, even if you do one of those things, none of those things are particularly difficult.
Yes.
Even if you do one of those things, that is infinitely more valuable than me standing up there saying, we're gathered here on lands that aren't ours.
Exactly.
Cool. Let's continue the program. None of that makes any sense. It's
No.
like, we're here, we stole it, we're benefiting from it,
Yeah.
we're proud of it, and on with the program. Like, that's how it comes off.
Absolutely.
And then when white people do it, it's even worse because they think that they're like, I see the pride when they're like
Yeah.
doing these land acknowledgements. They make them sound so sexy and so like huge and like
Yeah.
they're giving like a national speech for the British monarchy or something.
Totally.
It's so awkward. And then nothing happens. And like, especially like, we go to a lot of events, right? I'm
Yes.
always at like red carpet events and like these events where these big galas and people go up and they always do land acknowledgements. And I'll do a little bit of research and I'm like, okay, so the event we're at is funded by like oil companies.
Yes.
None of what's happening tonight will benefit any indigenous people.
Totally.
Why even put that land acknowledgement in there?
Yeah.
What's the point? Who
Exactly.
is it helping? It's not helping us.
No.
It's helping you.
100%.
It's just for you. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, you should have just said that.
Yeah.
Like,
Performative activism.
let's not all pretend that what's happening isn't happening.
No.
But yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Okay.
I
I'm so
say
happy you talked
if
about
I could
this.
just go up there and say, F you all, give the land back,
Yeah.
fuckers. Like, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but
Yeah.
just like,
We hate
how about we
everything
just
here.
give the land back? Have a
Yeah.
good day.
Totally.
I would just do that. Because like it's empty without action.
For sure. Exactly.
Oh, and one piece of advice to any white person whose work like is like requiring them to do a land
Yeah.
acknowledgement. Do the land acknowledgement, but challenge people at the end to do one action
Totally.
to respect the land
Yes.
or to or challenge your work
Yeah.
to do something. Like if I'm gonna give this land acknowledgement, you have to go and donate $5,000 to this really important cause that's happening in the
Totally.
city, or we all have to participate in Orange Shirt Day and
Mhm.
support all of the young people, or like maybe we all go and attend a protest. I don't know, something,
Totally. Agreed. Yeah, there needs to be action
Why not?
to it. Well, thank you. Thank you for shedding some light onto this because
But I don't think not everybody agrees with me, but
yeah.
most people do. I
I
feel
mean,
like.
I definitely I feel like we're on the same level with this one. Oh. I know I have like a few events coming up, and so this is thank you for giving me some ideas on how I can change
And
this.
stop asking AI to write your land acknowledgements, for fuck's sake.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
You can just tell. It's like, oh, that's ChatGPT.
Yeah. Oh.
That's like the First Nation of ChatGPT.
Oh God.
It's happening.
Awful.
It's happening out there. I
Awful.
worked for the city of Edmonton.
Yeah.
I was a mental health support worker.
Okay.
I had nothing to do with my indigeneity.
Yes.
I was there because I was qualified.
Yeah.
The first day, they're like, hey, our land acknowledgement's 13 years old. Do you mind rejigging it? I'm like, that's not in my job description
No,
at all. And in
exactly.
fact, that's like
How dare you ask me?
disrespectful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And it was like the worst land acknowledgement ever. It was just so politically correct and like,
Ugh.
and they were missing nations. I was like,
Oh,
who did this? They were like, oh, the one other indigenous person we hired of 12,000 staff 15 years ago
Yeah.
who doesn't work here anymore.
Cute.
I'm like, okay, I'm the only one now. So that's on my shoulders now. Not like you couldn't like, pay the people of the land you're on to like help
Totally.
you with it.
Exactly.
Whatever.
People.
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, thank you for that. I feel like that was another very important conversation. Now, on something a little bit, I guess a bit lighter, and part of your passion is I know that you love gaming.
I
Big into
love
streaming.
gaming.
I love that you like share
Mhm.
this because I'm like a closet nerd. So like I don't admit online that I like love video games and all of that sort of world. But I guess like how have you found, I guess like because the gaming world in terms of like your indigenous and like your queerness or your indigiqueerness, like has it been accepting? Has it been like a
No,
positive safe space?
nope,
No.
not at all.
Okay.
And never has been.
Interesting.
And still isn't.
Really?
At all. In fact, it's worse.
No way.
100%. Which is why I'm doing what I do.
Yeah.
Because the gaming. So for context, I'm like a super gamer. Like
Yes.
I'm talking like 15 years Mythic Raider in World of Warcraft.
Love it.
Like with my guild, I literally did like guild meetups like 5
Yeah.
times around North America. Played on an esports team in Edmonton for Overwatch. Hit like Grandmaster top
Oh my
500.
God.
And played in the Overwatch Open. And then now I co-founded an indigenous gaming organization
Yes.
called Nietzsche Clan, which partners with like EA Sports and Rogers and like so mega nerd, super super nerd. When I'm not doing anything but sleeping and working, I'm playing video games probably
Love.
or thinking about games
Totally.
or watching YouTube videos about gaming. So that's my life ever since I was like 5 or 6 years old. But yeah, my experience in gaming has always been so toxic
Yes.
because I love competitive gaming.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't like win and beat people, it's not as fun for me.
Yes.
I'm not one of those gamers who's like, I'm gonna play Stardew Valley and
Totally.
walk around and like raise chickens and it's just
Yeah.
like a solo player like
Yeah.
Sims game.
No.
No, I'm like, I want to shoot people. I
Yeah.
want them to die. I want to get a scoreboard. I want to see the results. It's very much like a actual sports, like
Totally.
hockey or
It
whatever. Like I want to
is.
be the top
Abso-
scorer. I want our team to win. We need some like prizes. Like that's how I like to play video games and what I get out of them. And so being in those spaces with other competitive people, the gaming world is very similar to society.
Yes.
The people who are playing with me in those games, 80% of them are straight, like
Yes.
cishet white boys
Yeah.
from the ages of like 14 to about 30.
Oh gosh.
So you can imagine. And
Yeah.
many of them, gaming is their only sort of form of socializing,
Oh
and
yeah.
gaming teaches them a lot. And oh my gosh, is it ever toxic? If you're a woman, if you're queer, even if you sound like a woman,
Yeah.
and which I have like gay voice.
Yeah.
And so if I'm even just, if I just say hello, literally sometimes it's just, hey guys, how's it going? Instead of, hey guys, how's it going?
Oh no.
If I just go, hey guys, how's it going? It's like, oh, faggot, what the fuck? Oh, of course I got another like sissy on my team. Like the whole team just
Oh.
implodes. And I'm just trying to win. I'm just trying to have a good time.
Totally. I
I'm
hope
really
you annihilate them
friendly.
all.
Yeah, no, I'm really good. So it's like rather than like work with me and be my teammate, they'd
Yeah.
rather just throw the game
Ugh,
or like disconnect or like report me
that's
or like whatever
awful.
consistently. I would say like just as many good games as I have just as many bad games, if
Shit.
not more.
Really?
And it got to the point where I don't even talk in like I don't even turn on voice chat anymore.
No.
All of the queer slash two spirit slash indigenous people and women that I know who game, none of them use voice chat. They don't use it for socializing. They'll only play with people that they know in real life
Wow.
or that they've talked to online for a long time and are safe with. And that's why I created Nietzsche Clan
Yeah.
because, oh, it's just so necessary. The gaming world is vapid. It's just vile. It's awful. And it needs to be gayed up.
Yes.
It needs to, we need to have, that's why I'm so glad of this like trend, this wave of drag queens getting
Yeah.
into gaming. They're
Totally.
everywhere. Like every drag queen is a gamer now. And I'm like, yes, bitch. Like they're the people who are always so unapologetic
Yeah.
and will just read you right
Totally.
back.
Yeah,
Like they
exactly.
have thick skin because of all the makeup.
Yeah.
But they can take all the insults and they
Yes.
just give it right back. And they don't give
Totally.
a shit. Like they don't care. They've heard worse.
Yeah.
And they're not gonna let some 15-year-old white kid bully them who lives in his mother's
This is so
basement.
interesting. I haven't actually heard about the drag queens like
Oh yeah,
doing
there's
this. This is
tons of them.
amazing.
Go on TikTok.
Oh my
There's
God.
like every time I'm scrolling my For You page and looking at the streamers, it's almost
Yeah.
always like just random
Oh my
drag
God.
queens.
I love
And they
it.
play all types of games. It's so hilarious to watch. Even like Trixie Mattel is
Yeah.
like super into
Oh my
gaming.
God.
Like it's
Cool.
crazy. And so that's why I do what I do in gaming is because it was just one of those spaces where I'm in love with gaming, but the gaming world is not in love with people like
Mhm.
me. And I hate that. And I
Totally.
hate
Okay.
feeling like I can't be safe or that I can't enjoy something as much as somebody else does just because of who I am or where I come from or what I sound
Totally.
like or anything like that. Because I will beat you at your own game.
Yeah.
I will.
Fuck that
And
shit. Take
you
up
can
your
either be on
space.
my team or
Annihilate them.
against it. For real. But now we have Nietzsche Clan, so I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about playing with anybody that I don't want to.
Totally. That's good. I think it's really great that you created that too. It's hey,
Yeah.
inspiring. So as you wrap up, how can people follow along your journey? Where can they find you?
So I actually hosted the first ever Canadian original series for Snapchat, which is called Reclaimed.
Yes.
Go and check it out. Reclaimed. My username is Kairyn. It's just my first name, Kairyn, and then just OHKAIRYN on pretty much all platforms.
Love it.
I try to keep it consistent.
Totally.
You can just search up Kairyn. You'll find me anywhere. I'm like
You will.
on all globes of the internet, and I used to be Tumblr famous back in the day.
Ooh.
Not anymore, but back when Tumblr was like a big thing. So I'm like chronically online. I just love technology. I
feel
love the
you.
internet and I love technological advancements. So find me wherever you enjoy social media.
Ah,
Except for X. I don't really use that very
Yeah,
often.
me
Twitter,
either. Deleted.
not really into it. I try Threads. Threads is okay, but it's like,
It's not the
it's not,
same.
no, it's not the same. I like Facebook. I'm old school. Indigenous people love Facebook.
Yeah, okay.
Indigenous people, that's our social
Know
media.
your market.
It's so like Nietzsche focused.
Yes.
Like natives only use Facebook. I don't know why.
Okay. That's okay.
But it's such a good place for like my business.
Yeah.
Because they like share, they like interact with me, they're like creating events,
I
they're like
love
top
it.
fans, they're like giving me money on there. And I'm like, I love it. It's great. So Facebook,
Okay.
hit me up.
You heard it here.
I didn't even realize I had followers on Facebook because I just thought I had friends.
Yes.
But I didn't realize people can follow you.
Totally.
There's like almost 30,000 followers. I'm like, I don't even post on Facebook.
That's hilarious. Hey, I missed market.
It's such a missed market.
Yeah.
Get on Facebook, man. It's an ad for Facebook, for Meta.
Yeah, exactly.
Meta hit me up. They hit up all my friends, not me.
Hello.
You ever have like brands that you really want to work with,
Yes.
but like they only work with your
Oh
friends?
my God. I feel
I'm like,
you.
I wear that brand every day and post
Literally,
them like
I
for the
talk about it
last
all
2
the
years.
time.
And they're posting you. Like, I'm just so envious.
I think we just give them too much.
Uniqlo is one of those brands for me.
Yeah.
I've been trying to work with them for so long, and I'm wearing always Uniqlo. And then they
So
reach out to
funny.
like 3 of my friends, and I'm like, please notice me.
Wow. Do
And
you have
House
their
Labs.
contact? I'm like, I will send you their contact.
I do have,
Okay.
yeah, it's in the works. I hope.
Okay.
Maybe I'll hit you up
It's gonna
later.
happen.
But House Labs is another one where I'm like, work with me, please.
Totally. I need to.
I love House Labs.
Well, thank you so much for having this conversation.
Yeah, I had a lot
I
of fun.
adore you.
It kind of
and
was like it's a little serious, but
it was
it's
good.
important.
Hey, that's what this podcast is all about, having those hard conversations. So
Totally. I had a great time.